Yay Networks.
One of the questions that I often get is, what are some of the best apps, or what is the best app for tracking what I eat, what I drink? And that is what we'll be covering in this week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter, and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This summer is 25 years that I've been a registered dietitian, y'all. 25 years, 2.5 decades of talking with people and helping to guide and inspire and motivate people on doing the best that we can personally when it comes to wellness, nourishing our bodies well, moving our bodies well. And that looks different for every single person. Everyone's coming into it with a different approach. They're coming in from a different space. And what may be their space of thriving 10 years ago, 5 years ago is completely different now. And so not only does it look very different for everyone, our own personal journey is going to change so much over time. And it's been one of those things that's been a really rewarding thing is clients that I worked with literally now decades ago, to see their journey, to see their evolution, to see what may have been a resistance at first, a resistance to things like what we're talking about today, even tracking our food intake or even being mindful of food intake. You know, what may have started as a resistance, they just weren't in that space. Some of those very people now, they are certified group fitness instructors. They're leading, they're inspiring others themselves. And so it's been a really rewarding, as even just an understatement, but it's just been one of the most amazing things to watch over this window of time, the evolution of so many people. And so what we're talking about today is something that seems like a simple question. Hey, what is the best app, the best system for tracking what I'm eating and what I'm drinking? Essentially, a food log or food journal tracker. And it seems like a simple question, but there's so much under that. So for starters, is this person even the type who is open to keeping a food log of any type? You know, there's some people who really are into tracking data. They're into metrics. They're into numbers. They're into being precise about things. There's others who that alone, the idea of that alone of, oh my gosh, they're going to make me write down or track what I eat. That might be single-handedly what is keeping them from meeting with a dietitian in the first place. So I'll say this, know that if you're meeting with a dietitian, whether it's, you know, someone on our team or our lifestyle dietitians at Oshner Fitness Center, or any dietitian, if that's not something that you're into yet, it's okay. There's other approaches we can do. But I'll say for those who are into it, which is maybe you, which is maybe why you're listening to this episode, we do know that data is incredibly beneficial. The more information we have, the more data we have, especially when it's about ourselves personally, it can be so helpful. It can be so insightful. So again, not all of us are data trackers, you know, and what we're going to be talking about mostly in this episode is the apps and kind of the differences and what the apps can offer us. But the reality is for a lot of people, even, you know, I think we kind of stereotype or like, you know, by generation that we might think, you know, a younger person in their 20s, 30s is going to be more likely to use an app for tracking, and older people might be more pen and paper based. I don't always see that. You know, I see a lot of younger people who they're still kind of notebook people. They're pen and paper, they're writing it. And what now might be considered pen and paper might be like our notes feature in a smartphone to where you're still typing it, but it's sort of your own little notes that's there. That's definitely an option. So you can, I mean, better than nothing is, and especially if you're working with someone to provide guidance and feedback on nutrition, keeping a log of some type, whether it's pen and paper or the notes in your smartphone feature, that can help show, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here's what my choices have been in these different situations. Of course, the obvious there is that there's not feedback on, well, what are what are the nutrients that you're taking in? What's the calories look like, the protein, the fat, the sugar, the added sugars. So when we talk about data, we get a lot more data when we are using one of the apps for tracking. So 3 that we'll be talking about today is MyFitnessPal, which is one that I don't know if it's been around the longest, but is definitely one of the longest it's been around. And it's sort of been a go-to recommendation of mine for years. There's 2 others that we'll talk about. One is Cronometer and the other is Lose It. So we'll be talking about kind of the pros and cons, what each of these offer, what the differences are with these, and sort of where we're landing on that. But, just realize that if you are a pen and paper person, that's fine. The difference is that these apps are going to give us such insight about what we're doing and how it's affecting us right now, how it's affecting these other outcomes. And so the initial reason that someone may be saying, hey, what's the best app for tracking my food intake? Maybe that they are looking to lose extra pounds. And so for them, the first outcome measure that comes to mind might be the scale. I'm going to step on the scale. I'm going to see how what I'm eating is affecting my weight. Ideally, if you are a person that's tracking your weight by the scale, getting a scale at home that has body composition, Tanita is one brand, Tanita. They're not going to be as precise. They're not going to be as accurate, we should say, as what would be industrial is kind of a strange word to use, but like we use the InBody body composition machines at our fitness center, at Oshler Fitness Center. And it's like a $10,000 piece of equipment, and it's a very, very accurate. It's also very reliable. So what we have at home, the Tanita body fat scale that I have at home, it's different. It's way different than what I know is more accurate and the ones that we have at the office. But it's consistent at least. And so I would say if you are going to be a scale person, it can be a little bit more data to have a scale that is going to show you body composition. And whether or not that percent body fat that it's showing you is what it actually is, time after time, you'll at least be able to see trends. And so whether it's showing you, let's just say it's showing you 25% body fat, whether or not the reality is it's 15 or 20 or 25 or 30, if it's showing you 25% over time and then you start to see it edging up or edging down, you're at least seeing what that trend is. So I hope that makes sense. So even if it's not the exact correct composition, because it's a more inexpensive scale that's looking at that body fat composition at home, it'll at least show you the trend of staying steady or if it's going up or down. So I think that if someone is a scale person, I would encourage you to at least use that body composition feature on it. Because if your weight is not changing, but you're seeing that body fat dropping, then we know that what you're doing is working. You are hopefully, putting on more muscle mass, that body fat is dropping, your weight is staying the same. So again, going back to data is useful. And when we look at the number on the scale, that's only one marker. So seeing what that composition is. So again, an relatively inexpensive body fat scale at home can give us more insight than just a regular scale. So I'm kind of digressing there, but when we're looking at those food trackers, that's often the first reason someone is starting to track their food intake. They may want to lose weight. I'll encourage you though to cross-reference or use the data from a food tracking app. Use the data, if you want to see how it's affecting your weight or your body composition, body fat. But what about other aspects? What about how you slept last night? And so, gosh, I had a terrible night's sleep, or I felt like I had a lot of reflux overnight. What was dinner the night before? Or if you notice that for a few nights in a row, you didn't have that, and you usually do, go back and look at that food log. What did I do differently maybe at night that would have precipitated it or led to that or helped to avoid those things? It could be anything at night. I mean, it could be restless sleep, you're tossing and turning, your energy through the day. It could be that you're feeling like you're holding a lot of water, a lot of fluid retention. Your eyes are puffy, your rings are tight. Going back and looking at what your food log was can help you see how what you're putting in your body is affecting. Energy is one that is so subjective, but if you do feel like there's a few days where you're like, man, I've been feeling like really solid, like my mental, my focus is better, my mood is better, I'm feeling pretty positive. There's a lot of other factors that can play into that, but we also know that what we eat can absolutely have an influence on that. So we know that things like those refined, ultra-processed foods are linked to more anxiety. So if we're feeling that way, let's go back and look at our log for the past few days. If we've been feeling really great, what's led up to that? So I'd say using that data from your food tracking app to kind of cross-check and see, are you seeing how it affects these other trends? But then also cross-checking it if you are, again, a data person and you're using other trackers, if you're using the any type of, Apple Watch or Fitbit, or the Aura Ring that is looking at your blood pressure. It's looking at how the quality of your sleep is. Those things are going to be really excellent indicators, and tying into, again, if you see that for a few days in a row your blood pressure is running a lot higher, let's go back and look or your heart rate, we could say, is a lot higher. Let's go back and look. Did you have more alcohol those few days? And through the weekend you had more alcohol, your blood pressure ran higher those days. Your sleep quality was lower after a few days of alcohol. What does that look like? So you could use it if you're cross-check with things like a Fitbit, Apple Watch, or the Aura Ring. Also, if y'all have listened to this podcast before, I'm a big fan of the continuous glucose monitor and how we can see that our food and our movement and our sleep, how that affects our glucose levels in real time. I'll link to some of the past podcasts I've done so that we don't go way down a rabbit hole on that. But clearly, if you're looking at glucose levels and how what we're eating affects it, keeping that accurate and detailed food log is going to be really key there. So thinking that big picture of, it's not just a chore of tracking what we eat, and it can be really beneficial to use that data, not just for the scale. Oh, am I losing weight? There's so much more than that. And all those other things that we just talked about can be that motivation day in, day out, day in, day out to stay on track with these healthier choices that we've been making. The other thing I would say on keeping a food log, part of why I do like the app-based trackers, I'm all about pen and paper if that's someone's approach. What's nice about the app-based trackers is if you tend to kind of do the same things, you make your coffee the same way, you have the same types of things that are going into your smoothies, the same produce that you're piling into there, you don't have to type it out every single time or write it out every single time. The app-based trackers let you essentially copy and repeat, meal, snacks, foods from previous days. And so it sort of stores that, and you can just like check from, Monday and carry that over to Tuesday's log. So if you have certain things that are sort of standards that you don't really change these areas that much, it makes it really easy. It's cumbersome that first time. If you've got 10 different types of produce you're putting in that smoothie or all these other things, you do it one time though, and then it carries over day after day. So I like that element of it. And I think that can make it easier to track. One element that I really hesitate toward is how precise someone is when they're tracking. And so I would say, as much as you can, ballpark. Thinking about a deck of cards is about like 3 ounces of meat. A half of a cup is of say pasta or rice is what fits into about a cupcake wrapper. So doing a couple of measurements, if someone is kind of like really wants to be precise with it, if you have that scale out a time or two, or you're measuring that cereal or that grain or whatever, just be mindful of my preference and my recommendation. And I can't really think of many occasions that I would say I wanted someone to keep doing that. Get to where you're able to eyeball it. If you're having the same types of grains or let's say cereal each day, you may measure that once or twice to see, well, what really is a serving? Because gosh, what I'm pouring out of the cereal container might be 4 servings compared to what they're saying is on the label. And so how much am I really having? But then if you're using similar types of bowls or cups or whatever, you can kind of sort of eyeball and where it's going to fit inside of that. Like, where does it hit in that plate or bowl or whatever? So while I like someone to be informed on entering and inputting the data, there's a big element of it that really makes me sad. And I don't love the idea of people that are tied to measuring cups, spoons, and a kitchen scale. So I think it can be a valuable tool to kind of get your bearings and kind of get a sense of it, maybe for the first day or two. Because if you literally are like, I have no idea if this is 3 ounces or 12 ounces, and it's just not something you've ever thought of, that can help get you familiar and then put it away. I mean, nobody wants to live their life as you're about to sit down and enjoy a meal or a snack or whatever with measuring and weighing things. So that's another element I would say is if you feel like you want to do that to kind of get an idea of it, do it just enough to be comfortable with it, and then trust yourself to visualize it. The other thing is, if it's not absolutely perfect, it's okay. I mean, for the most part, there might be some exception that if someone is, you know, having to be really mindful of carbohydrate intake for medications or insulin or something like that, we may need to be very strict and specific on it. But for most of us, close enough is going to be good enough. So those are all just kind of some things to think through. One of the things also I would say about the food tracking apps is it gives us not just what we ate, but it allows us to see the calories we eat. It allows us to see the protein, the carbs, the fiber, the sodium. So those are things that if you're mindful of those, then tracking what you're eating, it can also help. So when we're looking at the trackers, I would say just like any type of data, it's only going to be as accurate as what the database accuracy is. And so that's going to be a really big factor when we talk about the three different apps. So MyFitnessPal, Cronometer, and Lose It are the ones we're talking about. So MyFitnessPal is the one I mentioned has been around. If it's not the oldest that stuck around, it's one of the oldest. Now, here's the deal with MyFitnessPal and then also Lose It that we'll talk about. There can be user entered data. And so what that means when we say user entered data, if I'm eating a Greek yogurt and I eat a Fage Greek yogurt and I look at that label and I input it into the database, then it can show up in your database. And we all hope that I entered it correctly. But sometimes you may see, so that Fage Greek yogurt, let's say it's got 20 grams of protein. Sometimes when we're looking at this, we can see that we could click on one and then we go, wait, my protein was so much lower for the day. And when we realize, oh, that yogurt that I chose as the option from the database, it showed that 0 protein. It was wrong. The data was entered wrong for those ingredients. So MyFitnessPal and Lose It, they do have what we refer to as user generated data, or you could say like user entered data. Basically the consumer, the person, like you, as you're having it, you find this new interesting, I don't know, protein chip at Costco and you're like, oh, and you don't see it in there yet. And you enter it in. It can make it convenient for you to enter new products, but it also can lower how accurate those are. So if you're using something like MyFitnessPal, you'll see that certain ingredients in there have basically a green check by it. And so they work to ensure that the items that are in there that have that green check have accurate nutrition information. So that's one big thing that I would say. I mentioned some of the pros that I think is that you can kind of copy day to day some of your really common things. It'll let you just like take Monday's meals or snacks that you did on Tuesday and basically copy them over to that day. It also, MyFitnessPal, you can customize what you want your calorie ranges to be, your other nutrient goals, your protein, your carbohydrates. And so it can help you kind of see if your goal is, I get the question a lot of how much protein do I need? And a very rough estimate is usually I would say as close to a gram of protein per pound of healthy body weight as possible. So if someone's 100 but anywhere from basically 3/4 to 1 gram of protein per pound of healthy body weight. So if someone is, 150 pounds, I would say roughly somewhere between 120, 150 grams of protein. And so if you've got that in there and that's your goal is, okay, I want to get 120 to 150 grams of protein. It lets you customize it and lets you see how close are you getting to that. So I like all of those things about MyFitnessPal. The caution I would say there is not all of the data has been checked for accuracy, but if you do see that green check mark, you can tell. Some of the drawbacks, they do have the option for a barcode scanner. So you do find that new cool protein chip at Costco. And instead of having to type it all in, which can feel a little cumbersome, it can feel like it's time consuming. It also can leave more room for error. If you do the paid subscription version, you can scan that barcode and it will enter that data or show you what the nutrition facts are on that. And then you can click, enter that into your food log. So that's one limitation. And then most vitamins and minerals aren't trackable on here. So there's a few that you can track: vitamins A, C, calcium, iron, potassium, sodium, but others we're not able to track. So if there's something that's very specific, um, all of those things are not included in there. So I think that MyFitnessPal is a really good option. It's one that a lot of people have been using for years. And if you keep using it, I think you're fantastic there. Um, Lose It is one that I would say is pretty similar to MyFitnessPal. Similarly, not all the items are checked and validated for accuracy. They have a different looking green check mark, but still green check mark that they, when you see that, same thing, like their team has reviewed it to be accurate and complete nutrition information. And they have typically calories, fat, saturated fat, your usual main nutrients. And a lot of the pros and cons are kind of similar that we talked about with MyFitnessPal. That barcode scanner only comes with a paid subscription. Different though is you can't customize even your calories that you want to do, or your nutrient profiles without a paid subscription. So it's user friendly, but of these three that we're talking about, it's probably my least favorite. MyFitnessPal is in the middle, and then Cronometer is my new favorite. It's one that it has a few benefits that sort of edge it just a bit above MyFitnessPal, in my opinion here. So all of the data that is in Cronometer is said to be verified, and it even user generated data, user submitted food, they say is reviewed by their team before it's added to the database for other people in the public to access. So even though you can take that cool protein chip from Costco, you can enter the nutrition information in there and you can use it for yourself, they say that their team reviews this for accuracy before it's pushed out for the public to use. Let's see, some of the other, the barcode on that one is free, which makes things, again, a lot easier. It's also easier to have it not only be accurate, but much more complete of the data that you're putting into the Cronometer, which is probably part of why it makes it easier for them to check it, because they're allowing everyone to use a barcode scanner. So you've got, a little bit more accuracy there. Different than the other two, it also has data for added sugar, not for every single food, but for at least a good number of foods, more than what the others have. So the requirement to include added sugar on nutrition facts label, that only became mandatory for the food industry, several years ago. And so these apps that have been around for a really long time, again, this is just my opinion, and my guess is that the data in these has just not caught up to have the added sugar added to all of these. And so Cronometer at least has more data for added sugar than what the other apps have. That barcode scanner feature is free. And then what's interesting here too, they actually tell you where their data comes from for the recipe, for the ingredients. And so they'll have tags in there. Like they may say, they'll tag it as USDA. So then you know that the nutrition information that you're looking at for that particular item that you clicked on is from the USDA nutrient database. There's also another tag they'll have that is NCCDB. Actually, I wasn't familiar with this one when I first looked at it. The NCCDB items, they come from a comprehensive, it's a database, a food database that is used in nutrition research. It stands for Nutrition Coordinating Center for Food and Nutrient Database. So basically, though, NCCDB or USDA are sort of your go-to to know that this is really validated for accuracy. And then they'll have other tags like TrustWell, which is a database that has like 35,000 plus products in there. Or they have something they call CRDB, and that is the Cronometer Community Database, which is, again, kind of that user generated. But they'll tag it so they tell you. So if you see this food item in there, and you see it as that CRDB, okay, well, that's that Cronometer database. That's that user generated that they say they're validating. Okay, but then also if you see the USDA or that NCCDB, then you would know these are like really legit because they're coming from the USDA or the database that that researchers are using for nutrition related research. So those are, I think, the reasons that sort of put Cronometer up above MyFitnessPal for me. If you have the free version, there's ads in it, which can kind of like, you know, it can be distracting to people. It can, but if you're willing to deal with that, I think the other elements of the free version are still really, really good. What's interesting though, is unless you do the paid version, you can't categorize your food log into meals and snacks. So you have to have the paid version for that. Also, if you're going to import recipes that you're doing, you've got to have the paid version. And what I'll do, instead of getting into pricing on each of these in this episode, I'm going to link to each of these. Cronometer, which is my preferred of these three. And really, these three are my top picks of all the food tracking apps that I've seen so far. So these are the top three. And then I would rank them, I think, as Cronometer, then MyFitnessPal, and then Lose It. What I'd say, again, is if you're doing MyFitnessPal and you've been doing it for a really long time and you've got all your own personal things that you're using a lot are already entered into there, keep it, use it. There's no sense in switching over to a whole new platform and having to recreate your own kind of like personal database and those foods that are kind of stored in your own area of that. Because if you haven't used them, you'll see that it keeps a history of it. It keeps a track of that. No reason to start that over with Cronometer. But if you're considering, if it's either been a long time since you've used one and you're looking to do it, or you've never done it before, I'd probably say try Cronometer first. MyFitnessPal is the second one, and then Lose It's probably my third preference for that. So I'll link to all of these, and then you can see, click to try the free versions, and then you can see what are the different subscription options or the different paid options based on how long you'd want to try it or different trials and stuff like that. So I won't get into the costs on there. All of these are available with some level of a free version on there. So I hope this has been helpful for you. So the bottom line on it is data. Yes, it's incredibly beneficial. It's incredibly insightful. Is it necessary to track our food log in order to be healthy? It's not. I personally don't do it. I have done it over the years. Especially if there was something I felt like was a challenge or something that I wanted to improve upon. I realized I needed more of certain things or less of certain things. In the past, I 100% have kept a detailed food log, and it's helped me with that behavior change. Tracking our food intake can help us see what we're doing now and how it's affecting us now. It can also help us see the value and the impact of the changes that we make. So it's not just to track it. It's to track it to see how does it affect those other things we talked about: energy, maybe reflux at night, weight, body composition, our heart rate, our glucose. If we're using something like a continuous glucose monitor, let's just see all of these things. And then as importantly, it lets us see how does what we eat affect these things. It also lets us see these changes that we're making and how does it affect those outcomes. How worth it is it? What is the value? What is the impact? So if there's other food trackers that I have missed that you're like, I can't even believe you didn't cover this one, tell me. Reach out to me. Let me know. Y'all know I'm always learning from y'all. There's always so much evolving, and I'm grateful if there's things that you've tried, you love, share it with me 100%. I'll include the links of the three that we talked about. I'll also include the links to the past episodes on continuous glucose monitors and other, we actually did another one on trackers like the Fitbits and Oura Rings and stuff, Apple Watches, kind of the different benefits of those. So I'll link to some of those podcasts on the different trackers that we've done, and then also each of these three food tracking apps. And always, again, let me know what you think. I always want to hear about it and hear about your experiences. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next time for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.